Okay, everybody, welcome to the next, I think this is part 8 of this video, and we did so much in part 7. It was a long video, I know, but we got so much functionality done. Today we're going to try and get it done is sort of the goal here, and from the programming side, so we can move on to the final piece of the documentation and to creating the video and wrapping up the internal assessment pieces. Okay, so let's take a look at where we kind of are with this project right now. So we have the electronics notes project all documented, and we were initializing the data structures, and then we were creating our main UI. So actually, this is something I want to address right now. I think I can see a better way to do this. If we go over to the data structures class, it's pretty good the way it is. But we created a static method, and the static method is great because it's a shared method, and we don't have to instantiate the class. But that also doesn't allow for certain things that I'd like to do. So instead of making it a static method like that, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a constructor. Data structures constructor. So it's a constructor of the class. And I'll just add that in as part of my documentation, right? So this is a constructor method that initializes the startup of this application, right? So it's the same kind of stuff, just I'm changing up the wording a little bit by loading the database from permanent storage. That's still going to be one of my goals, to do that and instantiate any other relevant classes. So that's still going to happen. But now if I go back to here, instead of that initialize method, which doesn't make sense anymore, now what I'm going to do is instantiate data structures. Now I'm going to keep the properties still static, so I don't have to actually create a data structures identifier name. It's an anonymous object that's been instantiated, but I can then just still call upon any static properties that are in the class. In a way, I can do that with the main UI as well. Like if I want to, I could just reduce that line to just that. It's created once. It doesn't really need a reference name or an identifier name. And let's just see if that still works, still functions the way we had originally designed it. Yes, it does. It still works. I could still create a new note. Those dialog boxes and stuff still appear and are still relevant to the way I wanted this program to run. Okay. By the way, I just now realizing that I didn't actually comment that this is the main method for the application. So I think I just want to add that in as just another document there. Okay, so that's a slight change. And now I'm going to jump over to that class in a second, but let's just review our other ones. The main user interface. This was one that we used the NetBeans designer for. It helped write a lot of the code for us. And actually, that's one of the things I wanted to do for this change, is we actually added a picture. Through the properties window that the NetBeans designer provides to us, we were able to add a picture into a label. And what I can do is I can scroll down into that code, that generated code that the designer generates, and I can find the line of code that actually does that. That's this line right here, where it sets the icon to that. And the reason why I want to do that is for another kind of a design purpose that I think would be nice. I'm going to actually steal that little piece of code, copy it, and go over to the data structures class and use that for a purpose. So I'm going to paste it in there. Okay. And the way the designer works is it doesn't do imports by putting a more explicit line of code. So I'm going to just reduce that line of code and actually import image icon. Now, image icon is used to create an icon object. So I'm actually going to add that as one of my public static objects, an icon called icon. So I can use it in multiple places. I have to import the icon. And then right here, I can set the icon equal to that new image icon. Okay. So that would be the idea, right? Is to do that. And there we go. And just to make for slightly better code, I'm just going to take this and copy it up and put it up here as one of my other private final or static final. string objects, which I'll just call my icon file equals that. Whoops. Darn it. Darn it all. 1 second. Let me just fix this by undoing back. Because I got to get that line again. There it is. Okay. So I'm going to go back to here and paste that in. And that's what I need to grab is this piece of code right here. It's going to be replaced by icon file down here and here. Okay, so that's my icon file, the notes.png, which comes from media. Okay, that's how it's going to get that resource. That's code I took from there. And now I can use that icon file in various places. And I'll show you where. Now, this also tells me why I can use other things publicly. So I'm thinking I might be able to use the title publicly. So I'm going to move this title from the private area over to the public area over here. Okay, just like the icon and the dialogues and the notes, I can maybe use part of this there. Also, this media package, this section right here where the media is, that actually might be a useful thing for now that I'm going to work with a permanent file. I could maybe save that file into that same location. So I'm going to make a string that my data file, or I'll just say my my path is equal to that. And that way when I go to notes, I can just attach the path in front of it. The path plus this is where you get to that icon file. Let's see if that still works when I, get to what I want it to do here. Okay, so I have a path, I have an icon file, I have my title, the electronic notes. Okay, it's a constant, it's not changing. These ones are changing. The icon, for example, is one that's changing. And why I wanted to actually do that was, I think I mentioned this briefly, in that dialogues class I provided in one of the other videos that you could download off my website. I had various overloaded versions of the dialogues constructor, including one that includes an icon so that every dialog box that appears could display an icon on it. So now maybe I could actually use that. So after foreground, I could add the next parameter or the next argument to this. So the next argument is the message type. So that I'm going to get from JOption pane, and I'm going to use the plain message. And then finally, I'm going to add the icon that I just created. And in theory, then that would be a part of every dialogue that's then created in this program. So let's see if it actually worked. Let's see if now when I display an icon, there we go. It's now displaying the little image on there. So that's just a nicer feature to this. So I'm going to document this in my design document as well, right? So this is a new day and a new piece of this. All right, so we're up to March. This is not the right document. So 1 sec. This is an older version. Let me try to open up the correct one. My section B. I think this is the right one, but let's just double check. Yeah, okay. So, March 31st, 2022, okay. We added some visual features like an icon to dialogues. So we did that, okay. I'm not going to really address any the other things yet. Now close that. That was the wrong one. Okay. But now that's a part of these icons, which is really nice. I can also actually maybe even use that up in this section up here. And I can use that title up there as well. So I think that is now something else I'm going to start to think about. Now, in order to use an icon, though, that's a little tricky. So this is a place where simulating how you as a student would do this, you might Google search this, right? Like how to add a icon to a J-frame, right? Like how would you do that? How would you add an icon to a J-frame? And you would find maybe something like from Stack Overflow that would give you sort of some code that you could try. Like you can see right here that I could be doing it by setting the icon image and getting an image from a image icon, right? And you can kind of see different ways of that kind of, and then there's alternative ways. So, okay, let's try that. So in order for me to do this, I would need not an icon, but an image. So a public static image object, I'll just call my icon image. Okay, so I better import that. Okay, so then how would I apply that from the icon? Well, I would say icon image equals, I would take the icon and cast it into an image icon. So take the icon, cast it into an image icon. So now it's of type image icon. And then call upon the method that I just saw on that Stack Overflow page to get, let's double check it. To get the image, not the class. All right, something's going wrong here. So let's back up a step here. I think I have a backwards bracket. That might be part of it. So now the image icon, get image. Having some typing issues. Okay, so there we go. That worked. So once I resolve my typing issues, now I have a new image icon that can go along with my icon. Now, how would I use that? Well, I'm going to use that as we start to review these user interfaces, right? That were then passed over, both the Note UI and the main UI, over to the controller. We did some sort of housekeeping stuff there. We did the set location and stuff like that. Well, let's try a little more now. Let's go main UI dot set title to be go to the data structures dot get the title. So that'll maybe set the title. But maybe we can go one step further. Main UI dot set the icon image to be go to data structures and get the icon image. And let's see if that works for that main controller. Let's see if we're applying those two changes. And there they are. There's the title, and there's the actual little icon image now appearing. Also, it appears down on the taskbar in Windows. So that's another nice feature there. And I'm going to take those two lines over to my other user interface as well. The new Note controller and its constructor, and do the same thing. Apply those two lines, switch the reference now to the correct user interface reference, run it to see if it works, create a new note, and there again, I'm seeing what I'd like to see. And if I enter that note, and click OK, stuff we tested yesterday, and then go and display that selected note, all of that sort of just functionality changes now visually a little bit better. Okay, so that was one thing I wanted to do today. But other than that, these classes are done, right? The Note class is done. It's all completed. The Notes class is mostly done. Okay, what we have left to do as of yesterday, if we did all this cool stuff, is the search, sort, and closing, which involves permanent files. We have data structures now updated a little bit. We use the linked list class that, again, we brought in from that code in a previous video from stuff we do in class, in my classes, in learning computer science. So all the cool methods that are part of the linked list, including the node class, and the dialogues class that we just used a second ago to alter and call a different dialogues constructor. But what I want to use today is another class that you can find, this time under the IO's place, file handler. So the file handler class, as it's documented, useful methods for working with files. Okay, and this is now one of our major goals to accomplish. In section A, and this is the wrong section A, so let me open the right one. I think it's this one. So in this section A, we have this idea of permanent files. It's 2B on our to-do list. So I'm going to also document that now. Okay. Whoops. Clicking the wrong thing there. Opening my email. Microsoft Outlook and Microsoft Word look so similar sometimes. Okay, so I'm going to close this version of A, go to B. Okay, dialogues, add a connection to a permanent storage, file. Okay, so that's a goal for today, and that addresses 2C on our success criteria. So it's going to address 2C, which is a big one, right? Okay, so let's get started with that. So which file handler method would we be looking for in all these methods? Well, we'll be obviously looking for a method that can effectively save something to a file. So if they're all named save, and it looks like they are, okay, we can sort of review them using the navigator here, and even just some of the pop-up documentation. Saves past text to a file. Well, it's going to be a little more than text. Save an array to a file. Well, it's going to be saving a little more than array. And I see one here for linked list, right? Save a linked list to a file, which is really cool, but it appears to be a linked list of strings only. But what we also have is a save object. Saves a generic object to the past file by a file name. So it creates a connection to a file name and saves it to that. That, I think, is pretty cool. We also have one that uses a file to save it. So both of those are potentially stuff we're going to use. So let's get set up for that. Let's go to data structures, and let's maybe make some of this stuff. Let's make a private static final file object called our data file. And since it's final, I'm going to make it all caps. Our data file, okay, equals a new file object. All right, so we have to import the file object into our class. And now we'll look through its constructors. And one of its constructors is a path, okay, or a URI. Those are both pretty cool things. But what if we were able to use this sort of thing? And what if we were able to create not an icon file, but the data file name, or I'll call it just file name. So it'll go to the same path, and it'll put in our data, and I'll just keep it as a TXT file. It's actually going to be just a text file. Okay, so could I use that file name to do that? Okay, maybe. That would be interesting if we could do that. So if that's the data file, could that be the place where it is in fact created? Well, we're going to find out. Now what I'm going to also do is, in addition to making the dialogues and the notes, I'm going to make a public static file handler object. Oops. So it's going to need to import that from that other package. The data type that this file handler will have, and I'll just call it file handler. Okay, the data type that it's going to use, because if you look in file handler and that you realize that it is generic, okay, it uses dialogues if necessary. That's when you ask the user if you want to save. We're not going to do that. We're just going to construct it, okay, just as a blank set of files here, right? And actually, this might be a problem, so we might have to adjust that. But we're going to make the file handler. Actually, why don't we do that before we make the dialogues, and then it's not an issue. Okay, and the type of data it's going to store is our notes, right? Our notes object. So it's going to store notes. Now, in order for this to work, though, notes has to be serializable, which is what we need when we're working with generic objects that can be saved as objects. So implements, which is now using a Serializable is using an interface. So the serializable interface is now implemented, right? Which means that the notes object can be serialized and turned into a file. Now, if notes is going to be serialized, we have to also think about its connected classes. So this might be a good opportunity for us to just double check our UML diagram. What's connected to notes in terms of being saved? Well, our entire linked list and our entire node class is connected because it's used within the notes class. I can see it right there. So if we go to linked lists and we double check it's already serializable. That was something already done. And that must mean that the node class probably is, yes, serializable. But let's check our UML diagram. The notes class is also connected to our note object. And it's also connected to data structures, but it's really data structures that connects to it. So the note class, so that's one more thing we're going to need to do is we're going to have to go to the note class and have it implement serializable as well. Okay, so now our note class is also a class that implements serializable. That's for the ease of saving this to a file, which is what we're shooting for here. All right, so put in a little documentation now in the note class, do a little save to get all these new classes all sort of saved up, jumping back to data structures. Okay, so we have the file handler. Let's instantiate it, okay? File handler equals new file handler, okay? Okie dokie. So the file handler has been initialized. It is now initialized, or it is a instantiated object that we can work with. And it's static and it's shared. So now we can think about when we want to use it. And maybe I want to use it right away. Maybe what I want to do is not do the notes this way, but maybe I want to go to that file handler and I want to open an object from a file. And we have a file, we have a data file. It will return to us, this method open object, returns to us the data type. And the data type we're looking for is notes. Okay, is a notes object. So I'm going to do this, that the notes I open from the file handler that I just instantiated, which opens from the data file. However, obviously the very first time I run this, there's not going to be that data file. It's not going to exist. So notes would be a null. So if notes equals null, then I will still run this line of code here and instantiate notes to be a new file. A new notes file. So that's for the times when there isn't a data file available. Now we can go over to the notes class and we can go down to that method that we left hanging last time, closing. And now what I think I want to try to do is go to data structures, go to the file handler, try to save now that object to a file. And what I want to save is the notes object to a file. And the file comes as well from data structures. That file object. And it's not just called file. It's data structures dot. Oh, did I make it private? That's not good. That data file, yeah, that's going to have to be public for this to work. I have to open it up. There it is. There's the data file. Okay, so in theory now, it's saving this notes object to the actual data file. Now, that's the closing option of closing and where that's called. It saves our database to a permanent file, yes. In a way that's called by the main controller as well. right? You can see here, it's closing the notes and then disposing of the user interface. So it calls that method to save it to a file and then disposes of the user interface in theory. Okay, so that's a big test, but let's see what happens now if our permanent storage, oh, well, yeah, there's no data file there for sure. It's trying to go to media, data, cannot find the path specified. Okay, so we got a problem with the path right away. So the path isn't correct. So we could hardline in a path. We could say like C/ this, that, and the other. But I think it might be more useful, right, to get that path from an object, right? Sort of like the way we just did, if we go back to data structures, with the image icon, right? We got this resource here. This resource that we're getting, okay, was from that icon file. That was really handy to be able to pull that in from that package. So that might be nice if we could do the same thing with our file object. So rather than maybe build the file here, I think I'd like to build that file from a file name in the instantiation here. So our data file, which obviously then makes it not final, right? It's not going to be a final anymore because I'm changing it. So I'm going to take that part out and I'm going to rename this data file across all my classes that use it. Okay. I'm not going to do this here, but I'll do it further down in there. So I'm just going to readjust this. Okay. This is going to get moved kind of over to here, just like icon and the rest of them, sort of down to here. This one's still constant, so I'll leave that up there. Straightening up this data structures class a little bit. Okay, so that's my public item. That's my private item. Okay, so let's space a few things out to really see what we got. File handler. Got some dialogues. Got an image icon. Got an icon. And in theory, I got a data file. Okay, so now let's try and make that data file. Let's try to instantiate it. So that's what we tried to do, is make it a new file that way. But maybe we should be doing the get class in the same way we did with image icon, dot get resource, and then use the same thing we did here, the file name right here. The file name right there. Okay, and that's an issue. No suitable constructor for URL. So that gives us a URL. So this get resource returns type URL. So it's time to do another check. How to change a URL to a, okay, and let's add another keyword to this so that we're not just searching the entire internet for stuff. A URL in Java to a, and I can look down the list, and what I actually need is a URI. That's the one that was in the constructor of the file class. I remember that it could construct it from a URI. Let's see if I can do an example of that. Could that be easily done? Actually, let me step back. Let's try Stack Overflow again. Just a little easier, a little faster to navigate Stack Overflow. Just jump right to code here. So it looks like there could be just potentially just a .URI method. That would make life really easy if that worked. So could I just right here put .to_URI? There's the method. And in theory, could that work? Well, almost. We're almost there. But now we got a bit of a try-catch issue. So I'm going to bring up a try-catch block here to help with this idea here. So we got a try block. And let's just kind of put all our code in the try block. All of this nifty code we're doing here. Okay, and oops. Clean it up a little bit. Oh, that's not what I wanted at all. Okay, not bad, not bad. Almost there. Okay, And I don't want to use this logger code. That's some weird stuff. I'll just do a system out. Okay, error with file. Okay, so in theory, that will be the try-catch block that I'm looking for here to try to execute this kind of cool way to put that sort of thing into a data file. Okay, all right, let's see what happens this time now with a run. Oh, we got a crash because return value is null. Okay, so we got to kind of break this into steps, I think. So we got to try and do this first. Okay, make a URI. Make that first. And it potentially could be a null, so we'll have to deal with that. But let's import that. Okay, if the URI equals null, then we're going to just make the data file how will we do this? Okay, I'm just going to put that in there for now. If it's a null, we'll do that. Otherwise, data file equals new file from that URI. And I'll just put in that name. What is it? Just the file name. I'll just put in data.txt. I'll just pop that in there. This is not going to be ideal. This is going to take some debugging. I don't want to spend a bunch of time on this video debugging. This was just an idea that I had on the fly. And it's good. You know, sometimes these kind of mistakes will happen, right? So it's good to kind of see them in action to kind of get a feel for what's going on there. Okay, we got some bugs happening. Removal double and double. I don't know what's going on there. Okay, let's try this again. We're going to get probably the same idea, right? Cannot leave because the return value is a null, right? So it's saying right here, this is returning a null. So actually, I think I did this in too many steps. I need to do this and then turn it into a URI. So we're going to move this down a step. And start it off because get resource returns a URL. So we're going to start it off as a URL first from the file name. And then we'll take the URL and turn it into a URI. And yeah, we got to import that now. And we're going to have to check that as well, if that URL equals null. And we'll just do a similar thing here. And it looks like we're going to have another try-catch issue here. No, I think we're okay. All right, so let's see if that runs. No, URL is null. Oh, because... yeah, so then what we would have to do is say URL equals a new URL. And what do we have for constructor options? All right, so we can take a string and build it in from that. So let's use our file name like that and build it that way. And let me guess. We have to add a throws clause for that. Or no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to add that throws clause. What I want to do, let me get rid of these, is I want to add another catch for this. Because that's what I teach. I teach the try-catch block. So I'm going to catch a potential error here now of another error with the file that could potentially be caught. And this one is a malformed URL. So paste that in there. And maybe if these errors occur, I think it might be good to know which error I'm dealing with. So it's that error, that type of error, or a malformed URL, that type of error. All right, let's see what happens. I'm going to guess one of those are going to come out. Yeah, the malformed URL, which is okay. But now what I wanted to do was actually try and make some data. And we got a null pointer. And the null pointer is a null exception because notes hasn't been instantiated. That's what the problem I thought would be. So notes was never built into an object back in data structures. Because it tried to open the data file, and if notes was null, then it would just make a new notes thing. Okay. I'm going to pause this video and do a little bit of debugging to not take up this video time. Okay, I'm back. So I think I have a solution. What I actually did was strip the code down a lot from what it was. So you can see right here, just create a URL from the file name, create a URL, a URI from the URL, build the data file from the URI, and then build the file handler. I didn't need all the if statements. I didn't need any of that stuff. I was overthinking it a little bit. So I'm going to get rid of that code. And I actually don't even need this catch block anymore either. That's also unnecessary. What I do need is the data file. So the fact that the data file doesn't exist yet, even if it's empty, needs to happen. So NetBeans can do this. I'm going to right click and create a new, and go down to other. A new other, scroll down past Java to once again to other. And then in here, if you look through this list of things you can make in NetBeans, an empty file is one of them. And I'm going to name it data.txt, exactly the name I have identified it's going to be. So now there's an actual data file there that I can use, because that's what I said I would call it, data.txt, in that path to the media file. So now, in theory, it's going to try to get there. It's going to try to find that file. And let's just run it and see what happens this time. So it's saying that there's a problem opening it, which is fine because it's not there. But now I'm actually going to create a note. This is my, my first note. That's the title. It's from March 31st of 2022. This is a test of the notes program. Right? Not a text. This is a test. And I'm going to click OK, which adds it in here, which is what it was supposed to do. But here's the big test. I'm going to close this program down. So electronic notes is no longer running. And I'm going to rerun it. And I'm going to click display all notes. And lo and behold, the note is there. And I can display that selected note. That was saved to the file permanently from one run of the program to the next. It has implemented a very important feature of what we wanted for this program, was the ability to be able to do that. That's a huge feature, right? To be able to save and open from a file, okay? So there it is. That's that nice feature there. And I think that also points out something that I can get rid of a lot of these things that I was importing that weren't needed at all, okay, by the data structures class. So that's now added a lot to this program. It's met that big design goal. So let's take a look back at section A. We now have really met all of criteria in typical cases, right? We've met all the minimum, electronic note, text entry, enter more than one note. In a lot of ways, we met all minimum cases, and we can even put that into our description. We met all that yesterday. So on our last day here, on March 30th, we met all minimum success criteria, right? All minimum criteria. And here it is today, on this day, and now we've met all typical criteria. We met them all. All the criteria for the typical scenario have been met. All right. Just a little bit. Come on. There we go. Okay, and let's add a column to this, because we're obviously going to have more to say in our record of tasks. So I got another thing that's going to go in, and I might as well add another one just in case we need another one. And there we go. So we have two more sort of sections ready to go. Design overviews looking good. That's still all in there. Maybe we should write a little more for our testing plan here, okay? Because we just did some testing, right? Add a node object through the node OI. It does get instantiated, added to the collection repeatedly. That worked. Test the display selected node and delete selected node. Now that notes are in the collection, we already did that. That was last time. Now what we can test and have test is, does the collection save to a permanent file when the application shuts down? And is that database of the collection data recovered or read from the file when the application starts up again? And the answer is yes, it does. We just finished that test, okay? So that is part of our testing plan, that it would do that, and it is successful. This is now a time, I think I'm going to take something that we did over in section A, and let's start getting our word count down now for section B, because now as we get closer to section B being a little more finalized, we want to be relevant, or we want to be cognizant of the fact that we have a word count going, right? It is now, right now, for section B, at, I can see it down below, 537 words. Okay, so we got a pretty good word count going between the two written sections. Okay, so does the collection save to a permanent file when the application shuts down? And is that database of collection data recovered or read from the file when the application starts up again? And debug any missing file errors, which we've done. Okay, so that was our testing plan. All right, so another major feature implemented. And actually, let's jump back to section A. Not only do we now meet all the typical requirements for success, we've now met most of our best case. What's missing is 1B and 1C, the sorting and the searching. Okay, we need to focus on 1B and 1C to meet our best case scenario. Now, in theory, we could wrap up right now. We don't need to necessarily meet that best case scenario. That might be a place to stop. But we have two buttons sitting on our design. We would probably, if we aren't going to meet those, remove the buttons and remove all the connections to those buttons that we had there. So I think we should at least go for it, right? We should go to try and get sorting and searching for this database down. I also noticed one other thing, and I think this would be a good thing to implement now, is now that we kind of have this sort of working, just closing a few of these tabs. When the main user interface appears, when it first appears, when it first loads up, which would be in this constructor here, it might be nice to actually see the stuff from the file, which is the stuff that we do when we run the method display all notes, right? When we display all the notes. So why don't we just run this method right here, right at the construction level. So right before we make it visible, let's just run display all notes, because we now have some notes in the permanent file. And there they are. So now they just appear, right? And now I'm going to delete this selected note. So now there's no notes. Close it off. Run it again. No notes have yet been created. That's okay. I like that idea, right? So this is my first note on March 31st, 2022, and I do want to fix that spelling mistake. This is a test. Click OK. Let's create another note. Let's assume it's actually April 1st, April Fool's Day. You fool. Click OK, and we'll do one more. This is our final note. Let's assume this is April 30th. All done. Okay, so we now have 3 notes, and we can even look at them. Let's display that selected note, right? Let's display this selected note. All working good. Close this sucker down. Run this sucker again, and there they all are again. So looking good with the permanent file. So the display all notes feature worked great. So what's left, right? What's left is in our main controller, sorting and searching will now need to be done inside this notes class. What does sort and what does search look like, and how do we implement them? So we do have, if you look here, a sort and a search class that you could potentially use. However, in using the linked list also has built-in search features. So I think I'm going to sort of implement that with the linked list here. So here's what we need to do. We need to bring up a dialog. And I'm going to check our design document because it kind of goes over this a little bit. Whoops, not this one, this one. In our design document, when we do the search, it says, do we want to search by? And I had this idea of a little drop down that would select one or the other. So I wonder if we could do something like that. So if we went to data structures, dialogs, is there some kind of a method? Well, there's one with buttons. Oh, choices. Could we provide a bunch of choices and say, which type of search? And we provide a bunch of options to them. Why don't we make that ahead of time? Let's make a string options array that would include like search by title and search by date. And those choices would obviously, they would select one. So their choice would come from this. So I'm going to break this into multiple lines, getting a bit long on the line here. Okay. And then if that choice dot equals what's in my array of choices, or sorry, array of options at spot 0, then I'll do one option, and else if I'll do the other option. And if they hit cancel, then I won't do anything. Okay. But let's just kind of see what that's essentially doing with the search now. Now that we actually have. So if I search all the notes, there, search by title, search by date. Which type of search am I going to do? So that's pretty cool. And if I cancel it out, nothing happens. But okay, so if they choose option 0 and I'm going to search by title, okay, then I need to know what that title is that I'm searching for. So I'm going to make a string for the title, and I'm going to once again use a dialog from data structures. And this time maybe I'll just use a good old input and have them enter the title to search for. So which title do you want me to look for, right? So that's the choice you made, right? So you want me to search for titles. Okay, enter it. Let me know which one you want. Okay, and I will do the same kind of idea down here with date. Okay, but it won't be title. It'll be date, and I'll ask them to enter date to search for. Okay, so now, in theory, what I could do is go to data structures, dot, notes. Sorry, I'm in notes already. So now I'm going to go to the list, and I could do some type of searching here. So I want it to be able to return to me a node object, because that would be the node I'm looking for, right? So is that going to work, right? I'm going to search for a note with that title, okay, with that particular title. So this would allow me to then compare notes to see which title is which. So I got a little more work to do with that to kind of analyze how is that going to work. And this also brings up how am I going to do sorting. So I think I'm going to have to put a little more work into the note class to know which actual thing I'm looking for, right, when I get a note. When I actually go into the note and I see does one note equal another note, because that's what searching would do. Because if you actually were to use in the linked list the searching features that are there, and let's just take a look at that linked list. And if I was to look for a note, what kind of searching options would I have, right? So there's a method called first index of, which gives me an index number. That's a bit of a search. There's a method called contains, which returns true or false. There is, however, the one I think we'll be probably wanting is the one that returns an array of notes, all the indices, right? This one. All the occurrences. So every single spot in the linked list where that type of note with that type of title or date occurs. So in this method, as it searches for that, it's going to use the equals method. The equals method of the data, and the data is a note. So that means I'm going to need to overload the equals method right here. I'm going to have to write a public Boolean equals method, okay, that overrides that other one, just the same way we did with toString. Then I'm going to take that object and turn it into a note. So I'm going to cast that object into a note object. Okay. Then once I have that note, now I have to figure out which equals am I performing. Am I performing an equals of the dates or of the titles? Okay. So for that, I'm going to actually add a neat little feature to this, I think. I'm going to add a way to signal which thing I'm looking for. Is the signal that I'm looking for, and I'm going to put this in our data structures class. I'm going to make it a public little feature that I can do here. This is an idea, I think. Public, static, and I'll just make it an int. Okay, the int for which type I'm searching for. And this will actually give me as well some constants I can use with this. So I'm going to make a few int constants. So one of them is by title. And this is an int, so I'm just going to assign it the number 0. Right? So if I'm searching by title, I'll assign it to 1. Searching by title will be a 1. Searching by date will be 2. So which type will it be, right? So this is now something I will set back here, right? So data structures dot type equals data structures dot by title. So I'm searching by title in this case, and obviously when I do the date, that'll be a different one. That'll be by date. Now, why is that important? Because now I can use that in the note class when I'm checking if two things are equal. If data structures dot type equals data structures dot by date or by title, then I'll do one piece of code, and otherwise I'll do a different piece of code. So now I'm going to check to see if this dot, and actually I'm going to rename note to that note. I just like the this and that. If this dot, so now I'm inside of this note object. So if this object, which is a note, and I'm looking for title, so if this dot get title dot equals that dot get title, because I'm searching by title, then I'll return true. But the equals method itself returns true and false, right? So I can just return that thing. I don't need to make another if statement. I can just return this dot get title equals that dot get title. Just save me a step, right? So I'm just going to return that. And I'll do the exact same thing with date. And if it's neither of those, I'm just going to return false, a scenario which shouldn't come up. But now I want to get the date and get the date. So now that little type will signal to the equals method which equals we're dealing with here. Which of the two equals methods am I actually dealing with? And since I'm here, I'm going to just take a second to actually comment the equals method, which I can just find right from the clone method because clone has an equals. So I'm just going to take that comment over to note, pop it in there, cheat a little bit. There it is. Okay, so I'm checking, does one object equal another object? So now it's used by notes. So now I can actually use that little type indicator for hopefully for the right purpose. Okay. Whew. So now with the linked list, we're going to have an array of note objects. Nifty. Okay. Let's see if we can go there. So an array of note objects. An array. Wow, what happened there? A note array equals, take my list, and not to array, but I need a note array, all the indices. Oh, sorry, it's going to give me the index numbers, not a note array. It's going to give me an array of integers of all the spots, all the indices of there. Okay, now if indices, the array, is a null, that means it didn't find it. What am I searching for? Oh, I'm searching for the title. Oh no, I know what I need to do. I need to make a note. Note to note equals a new note. All that really matters is the title. The date can be nothing. The choice can be nothing because it's going to search by title. And then that note is going to be used in the search of the list. Some tricky stuff here. I just realized I'm doing quite a bit here. All right, and I've lost myself in my code. Here we go. And now if that indices is null, then it's not in the list. So I'm going to bring up a dialog for that. Data structures dot dialogues dot output no notes with the title. And I can just pop that down there, and the title would be title are in the database. But else, now what am I going to do? Now I have a whole set of indices here. So I'm going to do kind of like what I did in display all, kind of. So I'm just going to steal a little bit of this code. I'm going to loop through and display a bunch of these. So remove everything out of the list box. But now what I'm going to loop through is indices, that array. I'm going to go through every indices spot. So the entire array of indices. So now it's a regular array, so it's dot length. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get from indices spot I, that thing from the list. Okay, so we'll get it from there. What did I do wrong there? Variable node is already defined. Oh, so now we need another node object. So this is a new node. And then I'm going to take that new node and I'm going to pop it into the list box. Crazy. But let's see if we can get something working on that. Oh, now we got no notes. Oh, we kind of messed it up. All right, so walks A Dave DD or whatever. Let's make another. No, let's just say Sam. Okay, so search all notes by title for walks. There it is. It found it. Isn't that crazy? Now let's display all the notes. Let's do another walks. So there's walks with K's in it this time. So walks A and walks K. And let's search all the notes by title for walks. And look at that. There's both of them. It worked. Oh my goodness. That's crazy. All right, so that was a huge success. Where is it? Let me just shut that sucker down. I'm just going to restart it back up again because there it is. There's our list. Okay, so that worked really well. Okay, some crazy code, but it did in fact do what we wanted it to do. I think then we'll have the exact same type of thing going on with the idea of doing it for the date. So the same thing will happen right here. Where we make it, but now this will be a null. The date will be filled in for the note. Okay. And we'll still all do this, but this will be with the date. That date are in the database. And then it will still do all this stuff. This will all still be the same. Okay. And since that's happening in both cases, we don't really need it to be controlled by our if statement. So I'll clean that up in a second. But that's the idea there, is that. So why don't we do this? Why don't we return? Why don't we exit this method early? And then we don't need an else. Then we can just drop this in after the if statement. So we'll do that. We'll return right here and leave the method early. And otherwise we don't need an else, like I said. And then we can just drop that thing that I copied down after the if statement right here. But for this to work, the indices array would have to be made ahead of time. So let's do that. Let's make indices up ahead of time. Just set it to null. And then we don't have to recreate it in here. It's already been declared. And recreate it here. And it just to shorten up our code a little bit. And there we go. Okay. Which type of search? If this, else if that. But then we do have to do an else now because if they do in fact hit cancel, we don't want to then go to the code below here. That would cause a big problem, right? So they either chose option 0, option 1, just notice that, for date, or if they hit cancel, we just leave. and then we do the rest of the code. This could probably be straightened up a little bit. It's a little bit long for me for a method, but let's see if we can search by date now. Search the notes by date. I know I have a date D, so I'm going to just put in D. No notes with the date D are in the database. Okay, let's try that again. Search for date. How about A? Okay, so we got to debug that. Let's see if title still works. Walks. Yeah, that still works. Display all the notes. Let's search by title for Dave. Oh, we do have case-sensitive searching here. I'm not sure if we wanted that, but we do. So maybe we should adjust that. Maybe, and that would just mean in our note class when we're checking if things are equals, we could check if they're equals ignoring the upper and lower caseness of it. So that just adds a little less for the user to worry about there. Okay. I think that's a good stopping point for today. I think that's a lot. I was hoping to wrap this all up, and I feel like I've been pushing it a bit to do that, but I think this is going to be it for today in terms of that, because that was a lot. And I think maybe I'll start tomorrow, the next video off by cleaning that up a little bit and seeing, because there was a little bit of start-stop today as I was kind of fumbling through the code. There's a bit of a migraine today as well. So, all right, so we'll see you guys next time on the next video.